Hi everyone, it's the Assyrian priestess with you. I hope this finds you well. Today I'm really excited to present a tarot talk on the Tower card. So there you go, the Tower wants to be known. So here in the image you will see multiple artistic representations of the card. And I'm going to give a short form presentation on the associations with the card and, how we might interpret it as it arises in our readings. So in the Marseille Tarot, the Tower is actually known as La Maison Dieu, which is the house of God. And even in the traditional Rider-Waite card, it was meant to be a representation of the Tower of Babel. The key words here are destruction and ruin. And for some reason, one of the quotes that came to mind for me was from Shakespeare's The Tempest. And the quote is, "Hell is empty and all the devils are here." Now, the Tower of Babel is a biblical story based on a Babylonian king who created this structure that was a representation of his god-like prowess. And the story says that God was so angered by this egotistical representation that he struck the tower down. And so the tower is a structure that we either build or that we agree to enter when we're invited, that makes us feel godlike. Now, in antiquity, this was not the reason why Assyrians built temples, and I'll get into that a bit later, but there is here a sort of act of God. The finger of God, or the Yod, comes to destroy this prison, this building, this structure that is often based around something that is linked to our personal pride, our status, or something that we think will give us power. So these are structures of our own making. At first, they appear good. Our intentions are good. We want something grand. We want something that protects us. We want something that is worthy of our labor or whatever it is. And so think about where the tower comes up for you personally. Now, this will be different for who you're reading for, but that's the first reflection is, when do you find the tower card arrives in readings for you? Because it is indicative of our will and our desire, not forgetting that the card prior to the tower is the devil. And I've got another tarot talk up around the devil card, so you might be interested in that. Now, in Lerner's Inner Child Tarot, we have the fairy tale Rapunzel. There we have Rapunzel locked in the tower, and she grows her hair as a way to escape, as a way to, get someone to climb up and down and help her escape. And the tower here, and especially for me, my interpretation of a tower is a structure that we build. Now, when I say structure that we build, I don't mean literally, but it does have a resonance in the real world. So a structure that we build might be a career that we identify with. It might be a job or an institution we work at. It might be a relationship status that we attain. It might be any situation that we identify with and that sort of becomes solidified. So when I say we identify with our career, not everybody who has a job identifies as that thing. And so they're more fluid and they can move around a bit more easily. I'm talking about those jobs and careers that we do identify with, that should they be removed, we have to ask ourselves the question, who am I without this thing? Now, for me, the tower is any system, structure, relationship, scenario, or place that we find ourselves where we are removed or locked away from our deep feminine psychic wisdom. So this could be any time you're in a daily schedule where you don't really have a time to stop and reflect about how you really feel. It could be a relationship that you ignore your intuition or your instincts and you go along with it because you're locked in to this deal or this contract or this symbol of status or this, the language that we have around relationships that we identify with, such as mother, daughter, wife, husband. And so I like that the Lerners have put Rapunzel in the tower. Well, this is an old fairy tale, but growing her hair represents the deep feminine wisdom and intuition and psyche. Something that comes naturally to you is what will save you. And often you will find, if you are a self-reflective person, that you are in charge of the destruction of the tower. And we'll get into that because in the traditional Rider-Waite, so I have the traditional Rider-Waite in the mini version, and then the after tarot, I just wanted to see how they had represented it. And really, I feel like the difference is the tower does fall and the people do land on earth. They make it. They're actually not dead. They're in a state of shock and recovery. But when I suggest that the tower is something you will personally choose to bring down, sometimes you can sense that the building is on fire. You can smell smoke. And this is obviously your deep psychic sense that you've been trying to ignore, locked in this prison of your own making. And the smarter you are, or let's say the more trusting you are of your inner knowing, is the moment you realize that you need to jump out in order to save your own life. So there is an act of God here and destiny, but it is matched with a sense of agency by the people in the tower who kind of, decide to live and save themselves, because they could sit in fear and let the flames engulf them, but they choose not to. So this is one hint that the tower is actually a liberator, which is why a lot of experienced readers will say, do not fear this card, whilst the destruction that it will wreak on your life will be irrevocable. It's like what I mean by irrevocable is it cannot be changed. Like, it will be life-changing. However, you will not only survive it, it was a good idea to get out of it, which is why they'll say, oh, the tower is a good thing, even though it doesn't feel like it when you are going through it. So the associations, I mean, obviously you can see in all of these cards lightning, fire, and there's a swiftness to this destruction. Like, once the tower hits, it's like a strike of lightning in your life. So think about when you get the news that someone has died. You can't plan that. It's a random phone call on a Tuesday afternoon, and it hits you. It's a sweeping swiftness that is irrevocable. It is unchangeable. Think about getting an eviction notice, losing your job, or even resigning. Sometimes when we put in our resignation, it causes a tower moment for the board of directors or for your managers or for whoever you report to, because it's a shock and it's unchangeable. It could also just sometimes be a realization that you just cannot unsee. It's when you realize, I've got to get out of here now. Whatever the here is, whether it's the place you're renting, whether it's a relationship you're in, it's that moment where you know it has to happen now, or I will die here. So you choose to jump out, and you choose to jump out to save yourself. Now, let's look at the Thoth deck. And Thoth relates the tower to Mars, which is the destruction of the planet Mars. So when Mars is in a conjunction or a placement, it can be a tower moment collectively as well. Irene Gadd wrote an excellent book called Tarot and Individuation. If you're interested in Kabbalah and Jungian analysis, you will enjoy her book. She actually associates the tower with the planet Uranus, and I tend to agree, because Uranus is that great liberator or awakener, and we just experienced, the collective has and is experiencing a major movement of the planet Uranus into the sign of Gemini, which is a 7-year transit, which also the number 7 is very sacred to the Assyrian way. And I'm not going to get into the numerology of the 7 today, but interestingly, the numerology of the Tower card is a 7, which I'll get into in a moment. So back to the Thoth deck and Crowley's work. So here you will see in Crowley's interpretation the destructive fire. At the top you're going to see an eye. This is the eye of Horus, the all-seeing divine eye. So the gods are at play. And he also associates it with the destruction of Shiva, which is the Hindu god of destruction. And I like that Ellen Lorenzi Prince in the Dark Goddess Tarot represents the goddess of destruction as Kali from the Hindu tradition. So let me know in the comments if you are a person from the Hindu tradition or have studied that tradition, because Kali is a bloodthirsty goddess, but often regarded as the great liberator. Now, back to the Thoth deck, we also have the symbols of the dove and the serpent that you'll see at the top. And according to Crowley, these two symbols represent the two wills of man, the will to live and the will to die. And so you choose wisely. That's the warning. The cautionary tale is choose wisely. And so this also links us back to the two figures in the traditional representation choosing to leap out because the will to live becomes stronger than the will to die. So we're learning here that this tower isn't all as it seems. This tower has become a prison. It's become a dark and lonely place. It is not a place we want to reside if we choose the will to live. And yeah, I really like that. Now, the leap into the unknown is sorry, that's just my book in the corner there. The leap into the unknown, because you're just going to hope for the best, aren't you? Like, you're in a high-rise building, it's on fire, you're going to leap. Will you live? Will you die? Well, of course, you're hoping to live. But you're leaping into the unknown, and this leap is something that we were always trying to avoid. So it's almost like you ended up in the place that you were meant to always end up, which is why there is the hand of God at play. That earthly realm, that earthly level, that lower level was the place you were trying to avoid by building the tower in the first place, so you could get away from what you could not face or did not want to face. This is according to Irene Gadd. She also makes the alchemical reference to the act of sublimation. So if you do study alchemy, sublimatio, which is the hammering of the metal of the spirit of the person, right? The dismantling, the weathering. Because when it gets trapped in conjunctio, when you get calcified, you have to be sort of softened. The hammering softens the silver. Think of the jeweler, hammers out the silver so it can, she can mold it into something new and fashion it into something new. But the process of sublimation hurts. It's agonizing. So there's a real kind of, alchemical transformation at play in the Tower card. But really it is a returning to earth. So the Tower is when we have our head in the clouds. We're not in reality. And I've got the Maiden card here from Chris Madsen's 3 Red Moons Oracle. And you're probably wondering, what is the Maiden doing here? The Maiden to me represents that spring, eternal spirit, that Princess of Wands energy, that will to create, that will to know, that feminine knowing, and that feminine creative spirit gets locked in the Tower, which is why we are liberated when we are released. We find truth in the rubble, even though it is quite humbling. And, Irene Gadd suggests that we want so much to escape our reality that we create these lofty structures, anything that we identify with as power. And this directly links me to the descent of Ishtar to the underworld. So in my work, kind of interpreting that mythology, Ishtar at each of the 7 gates, again we have the number 7, she has a garment of her sovereignty removed at each gate. And she is reduced to nothing. She is reduced to rubble, right? So this is the ultimate descent card. When you get it, you'll know. And when she actually finds herself at rock bottom and is saved by the will of the gods, she refashions herself in a new way. And she realizes that she is still the goddess Ishtar. She is still the queen of heaven and earth, even without her scepter, without her bangles, without her breastplate and her armor, without her crown, right? So this is what we also learn in the destruction of the tower, that I am not identified with this relationship, with this job, with this whatever prison. And actually, I'm fine. And you might even be better than fine, because don't forget, the card that is awaiting your querent or yourself is the Star, which is the card that follows. So there is this fall from above to below, and a returning to our deep psychic sense of who we already know we are without this identification. And it's also like, this above-below theme is all throughout the tarot. It's all throughout all magic and occult practices. And by occult, I mean hidden. There is no devilish meaning to that word. But it's the difference between high magic versus practical magic. So a lot of practitioners kind of laud high magic as a better form, a more intellectual form, and scoff at practical magic, which is mostly practiced by women. So by practical magic, I mean herbology, midwifery, anything of the flesh. The woman that heals you with herbs and tinctures and body work and the rest, she is practicing practical or earth-based magic. And this is the magic of our ancestors. But of course, the Assyrians did also create this sort of lofty high magic. And so this is also a reminder that those basic practices that link you to nature and Mother Earth are actually maybe more valuable. Don't think you're something more than a mere mortal in your practice. Now, I promised you that I would let you know that when the ancient Assyrians built temples, they were not trying to pretend they were gods. They were actually building temples in order to honor the gods and create a bridge between heaven and earth. And this actually links to the original split. So if you go to the Enuma Elish, which is the Babylonian myth, the creation myth, the cosmological myth of all cosmological myths, you will meet the primordial goddess of chaos, Tiamat, and you'll see her in Sandra Tabatha Cicero's, right here, card. I should probably get a better pointer. I actually have a beautiful pointer I should use next time, actually. So excuse me for using my hands, but you will see in the Babylonian tarot Marduk slaying Tiamat, who is here represented as a dragon. She was the primordial dragon. Some say she is a goddess of chaos. So when all was dark and black, it was Tiamat who came flaring forth, and that great flaring forth looked like a dragon in the sky that my teacher, Glenys Livingston, said was the Big Bang, was how the ancients remembered the actual Big Bang. Because it was this sort of like primordial, planetary, fiery force that crashed into Earth, into dark matter. It created something out of dark matter that created the world, and this is Tiamat. But that myth talks about the original split between the gods, because we see the gods of chaos overtaken by their progeny. And so the building of the temples for the Assyrians was a chance to heal that primordial split, according to Sally Nichols. And they were bringing order. So the destruction was not for destruction's sake. The destruction was to rid the world of illusion in order for order to prevail. So something that's been created or an identification is not right, is not true. And so the destruction comes for order to prevail. And in the Rider-Waite, it's actually not a temple. It looks like a cold and dank and dreary castle. And, you know, the tower can also be our own self-imposed isolation. We isolate ourselves for different reasons, and it sort of makes us think we are godlike. We do not need others. And so when that tower comes crashing down, we realize that we do need to come to earth. We do need to connect with community. So the numerology is 1 + 6, which is a 7. 7 is the descent, of course. The 1 + 6 is a 10 + 6. So equilibrium on the surface. 10 + 6, very solid equilibrium numbers. 6, the card of the lovers. 1, the fool, or the 10, the wheel of fortune. But put together they become 7, the descent, or in the major arcana, the chariot card, which is the card of the great returning home. The great returning home to oneself, aligning the will to go where? To return home to oneself. So from the words of Crowley, choose well, love shall be the whole of the law. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you stayed, really appreciate your comments, and just I appreciate your company. I love learning about the tarot, and I'm open to learning more and being corrected when I'm not in the right direction. So yeah, let me know, hang out, spend time here. Otherwise, I will leave you, as always, with my love and courage until we meet again. Bye for now.